Okay. So yeah, I'm Brad. I'm a front-end dev, and I'm going to be talking about color. So in the front end, there's 4 different systems we can use to define a color. The name system, hex, RGBA, and HSLA. You might think it's trivial which system you use, because in the end they all achieve the same result, but you would be wrong. I'm going to show you why I think HSLA is far more intuitive and useful than the other 3, and some of the things you can do with it. But first, I'll show you why I think the other systems fall short. So the name system is pretty straightforward. You just type in a name of a color from a list of keywords, and it spits out something. Some of the names are blue or light blue or green, but then you start going into salmon, lavender blush, tomato, Navajo white, and it's completely subjective, right? What I think Navajo white should look like might be completely different to what you think Navajo white should look like.
Probably. Do the browsers agree?
I don't know, because I just didn't bother. It's like, I don't know, it's like W3C, got drunk and went, yeah, this internet thing won't catch on, let's make up some colours. Tomato. Yeah, so name system, I'll leave it at that. These are some of my favourites. So dark grey is actually lighter than grey. And this one, lime green and lime are 2 different colours for some reason.
Are they the exact same value?
No, they're different colours. I think they should be lime, not lime green.
Is it unripe line and a ripe line?
Self-line?
Anyway, so let's talk about the hex system. Okay, so we're making progress here. To define a color in this, you type the hash symbol and then 3 hexadecimal numbers. The 3 numbers stand for how much red, green, and blue you want in your color. So side note, if any color can be made up of different amounts of red, green, and blue. That's a physics thing, not a front-end thing. The problem I have with this is I use base 10 for everything. I don't want to get comfortable with hex just to define a color. So it's not very intuitive. And defining a color based on amounts of red, green, and blue is really hard. If I was a Renaissance painter, awesome, I'd probably be good at it. But I never look at an orange button and say, oh yeah, we need a bit more red and a little less blue. Yeah. It's not helpful. So RGBA, we're making a little bit more progress here. To define a color, you call the RGBA function with 4 arguments. The first 3 are the amount of red, green, and blue you want in your color. But we're using base 10 here, and the numbers are just a number between 0 and 255. So it's a little bit more intuitive. We can use base 10 here. But we're still running into the same problem of defining a color by red, green, and blue. The 4th argument is actually pretty helpful. That's an alpha, and it's just the opacity of the color. It's just a number between 0 and 1. But that's kind of outside of the scope of this, so I'll leave it at that.
Can you achieve opacity at all with the previous one?
There is a modern proposal for it.
All right.
You can chuck in 2 extra decimal and then, it's not very
I just look at hexadecimal and why?
It's not true transparency. It depends on the colour behind it, which you can't think through.
Yeah.
No, you can actually put a 4th hex.
Yeah, no, but it's not really the same with each other. Old school hex.
Yeah.
It's a new thing.
That's fine.
You've got your equivalent back in mind, eh? It's like hex 8.
Just do this. Alright, so HSLA. Alright, so define a color in HSLA. Call a function with 4 arguments. Now the first argument is a number between 0 and 360. And it defines the hue. So if you think back to school with the color wheel, that is hues. So hues are pretty much, an easy way to think about it is any color except for black, white, and grey. So, where's my little mouse? Is this gonna, no. All right, so there we go. So yeah, any color on the color wheel going around 0 to 360, pretty intuitive.
Is there decimals in that possible?
I don't think, I never tried it. 360 colors was enough for me. I was pretty happy with it. And then it multiplies for sure. So the second number is saturation, and it's a percentage. Saturation is how vivid your color is. But an easy way to think about it is how much grey is in your color. So if we set saturation to 100%, there's no grey in the color. It's purely the hue you pick. But if you start to go down, you start adding grey into the color and it becomes duller. And when you hit 0%, it's completely grey and it doesn't matter what hue you pick. And the third argument is lightness. This is how bright your color is. So 50% is the brightest a color can be. You start going below 50%, you start adding black into the color. Hit 0, it's just black. You go above 50%, you start adding white into the color. At 100%, it will just be white. Cool, so to me that's a far more intuitive system than the others. And the last number is alpha, just like RGBA. If you're one of those people that like visuals of systems, that's kind of what HSLA would look like as a 3D diagram. So it's a cylinder. Going around in the circle is your different hues. Going up and down is your lightness. And going towards the center or to the outer edges is your saturation. So that's kind of how HSLA works, but that's half the story. What you can do with it is actually quite powerful. But before I touch on that, I just wanted to cover the concept of visual hierarchy. So it's pretty important in UI design. Visual hierarchy is the presentation of elements that communicates their level of importance. So imagine you had 3 squares on a screen and you wanted to communicate that the middle square was more important than the other 2. You could do something like make the middle square a lot bigger and the other 2 small, or something like make that orange and the other 2 grey. So it's kind of like showing what's important and trying to guide the user through importance to most important to least important. Guy by the name of Cameron Mole, he's like a 20-year veteran of web development. He states that visual hierarchy is the underpinning of all visual communication. Without it, design has no value. And visual hierarchy is hard. I found it's one of the hardest principles to master, no matter how many years of experience. When mastered, it's the most effective tool for building great user experiences. So, pretty daunting outlook. It's really important, but it's also really hard. Good news is HSLA can help you define this visual hierarchy. So, imagine you had a screen that showed a location on a map. At the moment, this map is using very high contrasting colors, which is helpful because it's really showing you what the different elements on this screen are. You have the water, the land, the location marker, and the toolbar. The problem is these colors aren't helping communicate any kind of visual hierarchy. So what I want to do is I want to make it so the toolbar comes across as most important, followed by the location marker, followed by the land, and then the water. So one approach to this is the first thing you do is kind of pick what color you want your least important element to be. So in our case, that would be the water. And change all the elements to that color. And then you move up the chain. So our next least important element is the land. And I'm going to do 3 things. It's a little tricky. I'm going to rotate the hue. I'm going to decrease the saturation. And I'm going to increase the lightness. Okay. So by doing that, you declare a color that comes off closer to the viewer than the previous color. So this color now communicates that it's more important than the one before it.
Can you explain the decision for the dark blue? How did you get to that? It's just
That's your decision.
it just needs to be blue, and you just chose one.
Yeah. You also have to be kind of careful because if you set that color to say 0 saturation and 100% lightness, you've got no room to move.
Yeah.
So you have to keep that in mind. But yeah, this is design, so there is no hard and fast rules about it has to be this, or you have to rotate the hue by this amount and decrease saturation. It's kind of like just a guideline, really.
But is there a mental process, or is it intuitive for you?
I definitely follow the rules of like rotating hue at lower saturation, increase lightness, but how much I do is intuitive. It's just, yeah, what looks best, as with all design. So you keep doing the same thing up the chain. So again, I rotate the hue. Decrease the saturation. And increase the lightness. Cool, so now we've got the water is receding, and then the land, and then the location marker. And we'll do the exact same for the toolbar. So yeah, now we've got the colours are helping communicate the visual hierarchy. Toolbar stands out the most, then the location marker, then the land, then the water. And you can see the pattern running down there. So each time the hue rotated, saturation went down, and the lightness went up. And doing this, the kind of colours coming off a bit weird on the screen, but doing this, the colours normally mesh really well together, so it looks like all these elements belong together. And using this system, you can also make pretty significant changes with little effort. So imagine that we had to change this screen for someone that had like a visual impairment, and they need the screen to be a lot brighter than what it is. All you would need to do is add a constant value to the lightness level, and you'd maintain your visual hierarchy, but have quite dramatically different screen. Or if you wanted to communicate that your app was in like a different mode than default, you could do something like just rotate the hues by a constant value, and you'd communicate that, but still maintain your visual hierarchy. So it is quite powerful, and it does help make like these color systems without just having to like just randomly pick colors. This kind of system can also help you do some pretty creative things pretty easily. So, This was like a marketing experience I made for a startup I used to work at. And what happens is when you scroll down, the background color changes. Now how I did that was using HSLA, I set a constant saturation and brightness, but the hue rotates depending on how far the user has scrolled down. So at 0% scroll, the hue's at 0. And as we go down, it rotates all the way through to 100% scroll, the hue goes to 360. And those colored, the objects in the middle, the exact same thing is happening, except that the starting value of the hue is set at 30. So those colors are always 30 degrees in front of the background, which makes sure they're contrasting enough to be able to see them. Now to do that that was pretty easy to code. But to do that with like RGBA or hex, I would have no idea how you'd pull that off. And you also have the benefit that because the saturation and lightness is a constant value, all these colors look like they belong together. They're all that kind of neon, kind of glowy look, which is quite difficult to pull off if you're just picking out colors from Illustrator or whatever. So you want to know